Hello artists, I am so excited for this lesson. If you're new joining us this week, my name is Bethany and I am one of the teachers for the Saturday Young Artist Workshop. And so just to introduce myself a little bit, I want to share a work of art I created with you. And so these lessons that we've been learning about are heavily reliant on nature, and so I wanted to share a work of art with you that I use nature as my inspiration. And so here is the artwork I created. And so this is actually done with colored pencils, and so I just use flowers that I observed to create this. And so actually for this lesson we're going to be basing our work on an environmental concern, which this is a subject that I don't really explore much in my personal artwork, and so it was really fun in this lesson to do that, and I know you guys are going to have a lot of fun with it too.
Hi artists, and welcome back to our Saturday Young Artist Workshop. I'm Katie if you're new here, and I am one of your teachers. So this is our third lesson, which also means that it's our last lesson. So today we will be creating an environmental art piece and creating an artist statement. So this is something that is probably pretty new to you. It's new to me as well, so don't stress about it. Although I have never created environmental art myself, I have been exposed to art that is inspired by the environment and by nature. So I want to show you all a piece that my mom did actually a few years back. So in this sculpture, this is supposed to be Mother Nature. So she made this out of a stick that she found on the ground, and she sanded it down, and then she painted on it. And back here we have a bee, and up here we've got a tree, and the sun and the moon. Got some butterflies on there too. And then her body and her head is made out of clay. And then her hair is wire, and she actually put some beads in there too. So I just wanted to show you all this because I think that this is a really cool sculpture that she did, and it's something that inspires me daily. I have it here in my dorm room with me because it reminds me of her and I miss her. But so now it is time to start this lesson, and I can't wait to see what you all come up with.
Hello artists, my name is Lacey. If you saw the other two videos, welcome back. And if you are new this week, then we are happy to have you. Welcome. So I wanted to show you some of the artwork that I did in high school, which is closer to your age group, because I think at this age, students really learn how to use art as a voice to talk about their concerns about the environment, and that kind of goes with our theme of how artists relate to nature and respond to nature. So without further ado, I have two that I dug up from high school. This one's pretty self-explanatory. The concern is plastic pollution, and it is two sea lions swimming in the ocean with plastic bottles glued to the canvas. And then this other one, we had to turn in an assignment every week, so they were always really open-ended, so I always chose to do environmental stuff. So this one's actually really close to the assignment that we're doing this week that we will get into later, and I will probably explain this one along with the one I did this week just to give you guys more variety in what to do. So I will explain the symbolism and all that. So yeah, we really look forward to seeing what you guys come up with, and we will get into it more right now.
Hello once again, young artists. If you're new here, my name's Cole. I'm a junior at SYAW, majoring in art education. One of your teachers for the Saturday Young Artist Workshop. Environmental art is not really something that I've had a lot of experience with on my own time, but I've really taken the opportunity to explore it more with you guys. So without further ado, here's my sample for this week. This week our project was picking an environmental issue and creating an artwork based on that and how it was important to us, and explaining why we chose it in an artist statement. So this is an example of pyrography or wood burning. I chose this because the medium is very open. You guys can choose whatever you want to do, and I encourage you to challenge yourself, maybe do something you're not as comfortable with, which this is something I wasn't as comfortable with, and I didn't think I could do it, but I did. So this is a bee inspired by the Save the Bees initiative. I did this little bee honeycomb pattern on the edges, and then a fact from NASA about how important bees are to our ecosystem.
Hello again, artists. So in this lesson, we're going to continue to explore how we as human beings and artists respond to nature. And so if you're new joining us, I want to review a little bit for you. And so in our first lesson, we learned how to closely observe nature. And then in the second lesson, we learned how artists can find inspiration in nature. And then in this final lesson, we're going to learn what responsibilities we as artists have to the environment. And we're going to explore this concept through the art of complaining. And so I'm sure you're wondering what this means, and I hope you're excited and you'll learn more about it soon.
Hello everyone, it's Lacey here to explain the step-by-step process and explain my teaching sample as well. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to think about an environmental concern that you have. For me personally, it was how the species crisis and the lack of biodiversity and how it is causing this global pandemic that we are going through right now. Because I feel like a lot of people look past that and they don't think about that as a reason that the virus is spreading. And I was inspired by this video that I saw on Instagram that one of the scientists that I follow put together. So I was inspired by that a long time ago, and for this assignment you have to get a quote because you want to search for other sources that state that as well. So I also found this article that kind of backed up what he was saying, and I got a quote from it. And you want to make sure that the quote that you're getting is from a credible source. For me, it's United Nations, which is pretty credible, and the author is Leo Hillman. He is a regional representative and director for Latin America and the Caribbean United Nations Environment Program, so he's credible as well. So I pulled a quote from here and I put it into a Word document because I personally want to include the text into my artwork so that the viewer is both sides of like a quote, a credible quote, along with the illustration works to inspire their concern, but you don't have to. But I have two different sizes here because I wanted to see which one would work better, and I ended up using this bigger one because I thought it looked better. And I printed that out so that I would have the quote, and I included it into my illustration. So the quote says, "If ecosystems are degraded, the natural barriers between them are removed, thus creating conditions for wider spreads of viruses. Nature is sending us a message." And you want to include the name and the credibility at the end. So if you include your actual quote in the illustration itself, you want to make sure that it goes with the composition. I wanted to have it in the circular motion that creates this force field. So the way I illustrated it to inspire concern is I have a human and they are being safeguarded by this biodiversity force field of sorts. So, and then surrounding that force field is burn marks that represent the virus and like the burning feeling of the lungs. And this force field is like surrounding the burns and isolating it so that it can't get to the person, and then she is safe and her lungs are safe and she's able to breathe. So that's kind of where that symbolism is tied to. Another big thing is scale. So with smaller scale artworks, it's more intimate between the viewer. They have to come up to it and look at it and interact with it on a very one-on-one level. So if that's what you want to go for, that's fine. Or you can make something large that gets to a lot of people. If I were to redo this one, I would have really liked to make this into a mural of sorts. so that it can interact with multiple people at once. So, and then for another example where the quote isn't included in the artwork, I'm going to look at the painting from high school that I showed you guys earlier. So the quote that I found in high school that inspired this artwork is from Silent Spring, which is a book by Rachel Carson. She's a marine biologist and ecologist. And she's very credible. This book is very credible. It sparked the environmental movement in the 60s. But the quote that I pulled from it was, "Man is part of nature, and his war against nature is inevitably a war against himself." So the way I illustrated that back then is I have this person who is part of nature, and she's kind of a tree person to show, like, symbolically how we are nature, and she's polluting herself by dumping chemicals into this lake, and her roots are sucking up the chemicals, and she's breathing in smog, and she's burning on fire. So she's kind of at war with herself. So if this were for this assignment, I would have taken this artist quote and I would have put it in a artist statement, and we will explain that as the last step for later. So you will create an artist statement and you will include this quote in there just to show that you've researched it. It doesn't have to be in your artwork, but it can be. So yeah, so as a summary, come up with a concern, look for a source that is credible, cite a source, quote something, and then you will illustrate that quote, and then you will take that quote and create an artist statement to go with your illustration. So yeah, we look forward to seeing what your guys' concerns are and how you choose to illustrate them, and we will see you next week.
So, this is the artwork that I created based off my environmental concern. First, here's the artist statement that I wrote. Air pollution can have negative effects on both the environment and on our overall health. More than 9 out of 10% of the world's population, or 92%, lives in a place where air pollution exceeds safe limits according to research from the World Health Organization. In this artwork, the columns are a representation of a factory. The glass acts as a separation between above and below ground. Under the ground are pipes, and above you can see the small amount of grass that remains. This grass is the only indication of any life in an array of man-made objects that have replaced the natural environment that was previously in this area. So that is my artist statement, and I included the research I found in this artist statement to support my defense from my perspective. The materials that I used in this sculpture include acrylic, glue, paper mache, preserved moss, and then I also used found objects, which include wood, glass, cotton, mesh, newspaper, cardboard tubes, a cardboard drink carrier, and bread ties. And so all of the found objects used I found at home and recycled. The scale of the sculpture is about 19 by 20 by 16 inches, so it's fairly large. And to walk you through my process of building the sculpture, I first identified an environmental concern that I observed in the world today. I chose air pollution, and I decided what my complaint was concerning this issue. So, after I had my idea and researched the topic, I gathered multiple different found objects. I then attached my objects with paper mache and some with super glue, and I painted everything. For this lesson, you get to decide what materials you want to use. But if this method interests you, the recipe for paper mache I used calls for 1 cup of flour to 2 cups of water. You then dip newspaper into the mixture and use that to bind your materials together. And so this is what I've created, and I'm excited to see your work.
Okay, so now I'm going to go a little more in depth about the artist statement that you're going to write to supplement your project. So the point of the artist statement is to give the viewer a little bit of a reading to help them better understand what the point of your project was and what it means to you and what you want them to take away from it. It doesn't have to be long. I wrote mine in this little notebook. It's about a full page in this little notebook. It's probably not even half a page. There's no set length, just as long as you get the information that you want to put out there on your paper. So I'll go ahead and read mine. the importance of bees. This piece is a pyrography on a 2x4-inch block of basswood. The front features a honeybee illustration supplemented with a honeycomb pattern on all edges, and on the back I've written a fact from NASA. Bees pollinate approximately 130 agricultural crops in the U.S., adding $14 billion annually to crop yield and quality. What inspired me to create this piece was the Save the Bees initiative. Bees are vital for pollination of 80% of plants and crops worldwide. Many factors such as the use of pesticides, habitat loss, and climate change are causing declining numbers in bee populations around the world. Bees play an important role in food production, maintaining biodiversity for vibrant ecosystems. Without bees, many species of plants would cease to bloom in the spring, and we would face food and vegetable shortages around the world. Save the bees. So, by reading this, you are going to have a better understanding of what this means to me and why I did it. Obviously, saving the bees is important. They're very important for our ecosystem. And that was, I dropped my thing. That was what inspired me to create this, because I think saving the bees is important and we can't live without them. So what I did in my artist statement was I did some research. I found some facts regarding bees, why the population was declining, and why they're important for the ecosystem. So that should be the bulk of your artist statement, to give the viewer of your project a better understanding of why you made something and why the issue you chose is important. Something else you can add in there that I added in there in the beginning was the medium. I explained what this was and what I did on all sides. So basically, you need to write a statement about what it is, why it's important, just to give the viewer a better understanding. I hope that helped, and I hope what I did here inspires you to create something. I encourage you to challenge yourself, and I encourage you to learn something new. Have at it.
Hello again, artist. I'm back. I just wanted to talk to you about some of the art that I made for this lesson. So while I was researching this lesson, I actually found 2 environmental concerns that pertain to me. So the first one was global warming, and the second one was deforestation. So global warming was something that had never really been on my radar. I'd always heard about it growing up, but never really educated on it. So it was pretty cool to find some things out about this. So my second subject was deforestation. So deforestation is a subject that I didn't really realize was that important to me. I didn't even really know what it was. But so deforestation is basically when we as humans cut down trees and we're destroying ecosystems and destroying homes for the animals that live in those trees. I grew up around the woods my entire life. I grew up in southern Illinois. There's a lot of wooded area down here. So the forest is something that is actually really important to me, and I didn't realize how important it was to me until now. I have made artist statements for both of those, and I'll show you those pieces of work right now. So this was the first artwork that I did, and this was for my global warming. And my artist statement that I created for it is, this artwork was created in response to the idea that global warming is causing harm to our world and to all species that inhabit it. Global warming is, according to NASA, the unusually rapid increase in Earth's average surface temperature over the past century, primarily due to the greenhouse gases released by people burning fossil fuels. The impact of global warming is far greater than just increasing temperatures. Warming modifies rainfall patterns, amplifies coastal erosion, lengthens the growing season in some regions, melts ice caps and glaciers, and alters the ranges of some infectious diseases. I chose to represent the melting Arctic by seating a mother bear and a baby bear on an iceberg, slowly drifting away from their home on land. The sweat bead rolling down the mother bear's cheek represents the rising global temperature and her stress to keep her baby safe. In the background, you will notice that there is a city pictured. This city is emitting toxic and high-temperature fumes into the atmosphere, aiding in this rapid global temperature rise. I hope that as a planet, we can cut back on greenhouse gas emissions and harmful fumes to cure the Earth of her sickness. So to create this artist statement, I started off by stating what this artwork was in response to. Then I found a quote from a credible source about my concern. I put this quote in here because it makes my artist statement more trustworthy. When people see facts, it gets their brains going, and they start to really think about the subject on hand. After this, I talked about what I did in my piece to portray global warming. To end my artist statement, I mentioned a goal that we as a whole could work towards. The next artwork that I created was for deforestation. I put a happy tree on here because that's what the trees look like before they are cut down. When the trees are cut down, no one is happy. Animals lose their homes, habitats are destroyed, and we are losing oxygen. It's scary to think about, but on average, 2,400 trees are cut down every minute worldwide. I grew up surrounded by forests, so this is a big concern to me. I wrote Magical Earth on my artwork because I want other people to stop and think about how magical our Earth really is. Have you ever gone into the woods and just listened to the trees? When you listen to the trees, you learn that they have a lot to say. I think that it's important that we always remember how crucial the trees are to our survival and to the survival of other animals. Humans at the very least should be planting a new tree each time they cut one down. To create my artwork for deforestation, I used Shrinky Dink paper. Shrinky Dinks are pieces of paper that you can draw on and then put in the oven, and then they shrink to keychain size. I also used regular markers for this artwork.
Alright artists, so we're nearing the end of our lesson, and so I want to remind you to bring either a photo or the artwork you created to our Zoom meeting on Saturday, November 14th. And also remember to bring your artist statement. And so this Zoom meeting is going to be a lot of fun. I want to personally encourage you to come. I really like to create art, but sharing it is just a whole nother experience, and I always find it really meaningful. And so definitely come. It's going to be a lot of fun. And so before we go, I want to leave you with a few reflection questions. First, how did your research affect the creation of your work? Did the creation of your artwork help you cope with your concern? What responsibilities do we as artists have to the environment? And lastly, how do we as human beings and artists respond to nature?
Hello everyone, one more thing before we end today's video. So we have 2 other videos that we have already posted. That's the found object doodle assignment, and we also have the mandala project. So I wanted to remind you that you guys can go back at any time if you have free time outside of this week's assignment to either redo the found object doodles or the mandala project, or you can completely go back and take a look at the video if you haven't seen it at all yet. You're completely welcome to. If you don't have time, that's completely fine as well. We don't want you feeling overwhelmed or feeling like you have to catch up, but I wanted to redo mine because I found this nutshell and I thought it would look really good as a bear's nose. So you guys are completely welcome to go back and do that, and we'd love to see it during your Zoom meeting next week. So get to creating.